The Civil War was a large event in the United States that turned the tide of American history, but not very many people know about Bleeding Kansas. Let's just say a bunch of people's homes got sacked and it was a rough time. Think of the 2020 election, but it was only in one state. And in this election, the state determines who has power in Congress and basically who has power over the entire nation. Power would become one of the most important influences over the United States. To understand why this place became such an explosion of violence, we need to look back a few years when Kansas was just a territory, specifically the Louisiana Purchase. Before the United States stretched from sea to shining sea, we need to take a look over Colonial Times when France was just in control over Central America. At the time, the United States just became a new country and thus wanted to start a new era of manifest destiny. The United States would have their lucky break when a slave rebellion in Haiti would lead needing to sell the land, thus leading to the United States expanding. When the United States was accepting new states to the country, most states would have the decision to become a free state or a slave state. So then, the southern states would complain if there was a free state added, thus giving free states more power. So, in order to preserve the Union and not destroy the country over a simple problem, new states would be added. Eventually, they would let states decide for themselves whether they wanted to be free or slave states. Now that we're caught up, it was time for Kansas and Missouri to decide what they wanted to be. Ultimately, Missouri would end up being a slave state, but Kansas was still going to decide by election. Unfortunately, southern states would bring their settlers to Kansas so that they could illegally vote in Kansas to become a slave state, and so that would lead them to having more power in Congress. The free states had the same idea. Most of the pro-slavery supporters would illegally vote in Kansas by using fear tactics and weapons. The anti-slavery town, known as Lawrence, would be in the crosshairs of pro-slavery attackers. About 1,200 pro-slavery men would siege the town. By the end of the siege, many homes would be destroyed, and one pro-slavery man would be killed. This was one of the most extreme cases of pro-slavery militias and anti-slavery militias moving into Kansas to make the state in their own image. While this was a victory for anti-slavery protesters, Kansas would become a free state to join the Union. Many lived in fear as they had to live under the possibility of pro-slavery militias taking over. In fact, Kansas first started its draft as becoming a slave state, but Congress would order a re-election due to the amount of irregularities in this election. When the election was redone, Kansas would become a free state and would allow Kansas to stop pro-slavery aggression. Unfortunately, Bleeding Kansas would not be seen as a warning to the greater Union. Instead, it would be seen as another problem to be kicked down the road. This problem would become so large, it would spark a large war nobody has ever seen before. Thankfully, instead of focusing on abolishing slavery, a president by the name of Abraham Lincoln would set his goals on reuniting the Union.